I'll be splitting the history of British currency into two parts. This part will be exploring the history of the currency itself, while the second part will be exploring the designs of British currency through time. Coins and currency first came to Britain on a large scale with the Roman invasions to boost trade and Romanisation. However, there was some small-scale operations of coinage in Britain done by the tribes before the Roman invasions. Not much is known about the Celtic Britons' coins, such as how much they're worth, and they were not used very widely. There were 5 main denominations of these Briton coins. Each Celtic tribe had their own, and only the tribes in what is now known as England used currency at all. Celtic coinage fell out of fashion very quickly with the Roman invasion. This may have been through force, but it may also have just been because the Roman coins were better. The Romans introduced the current weights to Britain. These are LSD, no, not the drug. Libre or Libra translates to pound. Celadus translates to shilling, and denarius or denari translates to pence. This is why the symbol for the pound is an L and not a P. Once the Romans left, making way for the Anglo-Saxons, coinage was in disarray. The Anglo-Saxons were forced to import coins from Europe, mainly from the Franks, for around a century. About 600 AD, the Anglo-Saxons then introduced the penny, and it was used across the whole of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. They also used other coins, but this varied from kingdom to kingdom. These coins didn't travel too far, and mainly stayed within their area of production and their kingdom. There were also slightly different variations of these kingdom coins in each region. The Vikings who settled in the British Isles also adopted this tradition, as coinage in Britain was far more sophisticated than the coinage in their own lands. They started putting themselves and other Scandinavian symbols on these coins, such as ravens. I'll be exploring how older coins looked using pictures in part 2. The penny remained the main currency for trading for 7 centuries in Britain, and it improved in quality year after year. These pennies were exceptionally well made and admired across Europe. Many mints opened across the whole of England as the Anglo-Saxon kings used them as soft power, putting phases of themselves on the coins. These coins were made mostly out of silver and possibly gold. However, you can count on your fingers how many of these gold coins have lasted, with pretty much all of them being melted down. In medieval Wales they used a currency called coinage, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. This literally translates into penny, and there's little known about this currency. Hywel Dda was the only Welsh ruler known to have minted his own proper coins. Coinage was not a proper currency, but held the exact value of silver and was soon taken over by English currency, even before Wales became a part of England. The Welsh people used English currency, most probably out of convenience more than anything else. Edgar the Peaceful reformed English currency, and it remained the basis of English coinage until the reign of Henry II. He did away with regional coins and standardised the system spread across the whole of England. These new coins bore a royal portrait and the royal name and title, while on the reverse the name of the moneyer and the mint where the coin was from. These coins are called the lung cross pennies, and they got their name from the crosses on the back. You could cut these coins along the cross in halves and quarters, and this was perfectly legal. Doing so would half or quarter the value of the coin. However, this left a sharp edge on the coins, and pockets weren't to be invented until around the 13th century. To avoid this, new tiny coins were slowly introduced. Gold coinage would also become more popular around this time. However, merchants would ship gold coinage to other nations to sell it for the raw cost of the gold. This is why early gold coinage was unstable at best, and this problem would continue until around the 1400s. Edgar also opened many mints across the nation that varied in size and production. Many Scandinavian coins of this time are found in England, and also Anglo-Saxon coins of the time found in Scandinavia. This suggests that there was a huge amount of trade going on between the two landmasses at the time, as there's been way too much currency found for this to all have been taken from raids and wars. The quality of coinage in England fluctuated year by year. Over time, the quality of coins was declining, with England having less quality coinage on and off. In 1124, Henry I summoned many of the moneyers to investigate the quality of coins they were producing, and he weren't impressed. At least half of these moneyers were producing inadequate coins, and some even clipping and filing the edges of coins for profit. This was treason, and as punishment the king started to cut pieces of the moneyers themselves off. He mainly cut off their right hands, and as historians state, their essential man parts, and I think you can figure out what that means. This helped improve the quality of coinage, however some dodgy dealings were still afoot. Where there's money to be made, people will risk it. During the anarchy civil wars upon Henry's death, coinage in England fell to an all-time low. Over a long period of time, the mints across the country were moved to the Tower of London, and named the Royal Mint. This is because the Tower of London was the main residence of the monarch at the time, and this way they could keep a close eye on the coinage quality. Doing so further improved the quality of coinage in England, with England having the highest quality of coinage in the world during the Edwardian era. These Royal Mint coins were accepted across the whole of Europe because of their great quality, with many European nations attempting to emulate them. This remained the case for around 200 years until the rest of Europe caught up. During this time, England continued to lay claim to France and remained at war with them until 1396. Because of this war, high taxation caused many revolts and peasant uprisings. And during these periods of war, inferior quality European coins circulated alongside the high quality English coins in England. The first currency on the island of Ireland was brought over by the Viking king, Cedric Silkbeard, and it should be noted that Ireland was far from unified at this time. These first Irish coins copied the coins of King Aethelred II of England. All these coins were pennies and revolved around the Dublin slave trade. They went out of fashion as they was becoming devalued over time. To increase the export of silver to England and France, some Irish kingdoms started to produce what is known as regal hammered coinage. However, these coins would vary greatly by area and by year. John de Courcy, an Anglo-Norman, started another currency for the island of Ireland in Ulster. However, these coins never really took off. Instead, English currency took off. This was spurred by English trade and the Irish-English territory. The coins independently minted in Ireland also closely imitated the English currency, as England started to influence many Irish kingdoms. As England started to conquer into the island of Ireland, Irish coinage such as the first Irish shilling were minted. Irish coinage would then be minted by the owner of the title Dominus Hiberniae, which translates to the Lordship of Ireland. The Kingdom of Ireland would then have its own Irish pound that regulated the Irish economy directly. These followed the template of English coins and were pegged to the English penny. Coinage further improved under Henry VII, with portraits and shields becoming much more detailed and lifelike. However, under King Henry VIII, coinage declined a bit. Due to his debts, he started to plate coins with copper, meaning over time the gold or silver would wear off. The most pronounced part of Henry on his coins was his nose, and over time the silver or gold would erode away, revealing copper. This is how King Henry VIII got the nickname Old Copper Nose. The influx of gold into Europe from Spanish colonies had also increased inflation, only adding to Henry VIII's money problems. This all changed when Queen Elizabeth I brought coinage back up to their high standard, and also introduced milling, which is the designs around the edges of the coins to aid counterfeit. Milling, however, was short-lived in England. During her rule, the penny would become less popular, with larger values of coins being minted. This is because of the huge amount of economic growth in England during her reign, called the Elizabethan Golden Age. The Scots pound was introduced by David I, who copied the French and English currencies as a template. The pound Scot, over time, would have a hard time competing with the pound sterling. By James III, it was worth less than a quarter. However, the Scots tried to save their own Scots pound. Over time, coins in Scotland were reformed to closely match that of England, but it still faced much deflation, with £12 Scots equaling £1 sterling. As deflation got out of hand, the Scots pound was pulled out of production in 1707, although the pound Scots still in circulation were accepted in Scotland. Scotland's economy was in a dire situation at the time due to their failed colonies. By the time of the Stuarts and the unification of Great Britain, all coins were being minted in the Royal Mint to ensure the quality of coins in England. The Act of Union created a monetary union merging both the English and Scottish monetary system. Coins were also used to boost the friendship and cooperation between England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland. For example, the currency would bear the Scottish coat of arms and the Irish harp. During the English Civil War, the English language finally made its way onto English coinage. These were called Commonwealth pennies. However, this didn't last long, as with the monarchy returning, so did the Latin. English would later return alongside Latin, which is the same situation as today. Copper coinage was also introduced around this time, however silver was far more common. During the Glorious Revolution, when Parliament kicked out the Catholic king in favour of a Protestant one, coinage fell out of the control of the Crown and into the power of Parliament. And it remains this way to this day. The Battle of Beachy Head against the French destroyed the Royal Navy. Because of this, Parliament founded the Bank of England, and with the profits built a new Royal Navy. A year later, in 1695, the Bank of Scotland was founded to support and promote Scottish business. Milling the patent edges had at this point taken off in Europe, however for whatever reason, not in Britain. It seems around the 1650s the Royal Mint were not at their best and producing lower quality coins. Merchants were even illegally minting their own higher quality coins at this point in time to boost trade. Because of this, Sir Isaac Newton became a master of the Royal Mint in 1696. He stated that around 20% of the coins he examined were counterfeit, and was determined to do something about it. He started what is known today as the Great Recoinage of 1696, and took this job extremely seriously, resigning from his other duties and determined to punish the clippers and counterfeiters. Clippers and counterfeiters, as we've explored before, have always been a problem, but Newton took on this task head on. He conducted these kinds of investigations himself, acting as a kind of coinage sheriff in Britain. He even went to the extent of dressing up in disguises and hanging out in taverns, Sherlock Holmes style, and he successfully prosecuted 28 moneyers. His work brought the English coins back up to standard with the rest of the world. A little side note here is that Newton also considered minting copper coins, however this didn't end up happening. With the Industrial Revolution and the steam engine, British coins would again become the best in the world, bar none. The Irish Parliament would also found the Bank of Ireland in 1781 to manage the economy of the Kingdom of Ireland as the Industrial Revolution spread. The coins made during this time are the quality of coinage we still have today, with other nations only catching up as they adopted the Industrial Revolution themselves. Copper coinage also took off in the mainstream during this time, with silver money becoming less popular. Silver pennies were not circulated into the main economy anymore, but still minted for the use of Maundry money. Maundry money is a Church of England tradition. This is where the monarch would give out silver coins to the elderly on Maundry Thursday, the day before Good Friday. Maundry Thursday still happens to this date, with special silver coins being minted just for that date. Copper coinage was first minted mostly by private businessmen and were not legal tender. However, this didn't stop the public from trading them. These copper coins, then called tokens, were mainly minted around Birmingham for industrial workers. Matthew Boulton, who minted many of these coins, was given permission to mint legal copper coins in 1797, where they took off big time. He minted these coins in Birmingham in his own mint called Soho Mint. These coins were larger, thicker and heavier than other coins at the time. Britain was also facing a silver shortage at this time, which egged on copper coins even more. On the same date, 1797, The first banknote was invented and issued. These weren't at this point on the gold standard and acted more like IOUs, though this is oversimplifying it. These first British banknotes were the first to be invented and circulated in Europe. However, it should be noted that the Chinese had been using banknotes for thousands of years prior to this. The Royal Mint was moved to Tower Hill in 1811 as the Tower of London was becoming too cramped at this point. The mass recoinage of 1816 saw a mass transition of the Royal Mint using the steam engine to mint all coins and restabilise it during the French Revolutionary Wars and the Napoleonic Wars. Around this point, the UK was the first nation in the world to adopt the gold standard, ensuring stability. You could take your coins and banknotes to the bank and exchange them for real value gold. World War I saw the loss of the gold standard as the UK borrowed heavily and the pound suffered. Winston Churchill returned the pound to the gold standard in 1925. However, this was again reversed in 1931, with the pound suffering again during World War II. The Anglo-Irish Treaty of 1921 saw an Irish Free State. They kept the historic currency but renamed it the Serostat pound in 1928. They also still accepted British coinage, however the British didn't accept the Serostat pound. This new Irish pound was pegged to the sterling for stability, with the United Kingdom agreeing to continue to mint Irish coins until they were no longer needed. Until up around the 1940s, the pound sterling was the dominant currency around the globe. However, as Great Britain declined as the superpower during the Cold War and the USA rose, the USA dollar became the new dominant currency. This is why former British colonies such as Australia and Canada used the dollar instead of the pound. While the pound was the dominant currency before the rise of the US dollar, much of the world was in the sterling area. The sterling area was where nations pegged their currencies to the pound, or used the pound itself as their currency. Nowadays we would call this a monetary union. Many of these nations were part of the British Empire, but a significant minority were not. It started around the 1930s, and at the end of the war in 1945, the sterling area remained the largest and most coherent currency bloc in the world. Canada and Newfoundland never joined the sterling area due to their proximity to the USA dollar and how intertwined their economies were, even in the 1930s. Egypt was the first nation to leave the sterling area in 1947. They left due to a falling out with Britain after World War II over Palestine, although they still use the Egyptian pound to this day. A year later, in 1948, the British mandate for Palestine was also required to leave due to the creation of the new nation, Israel. Iraq left in 1959 due to instability in the region. This was because of the Mosul uprising between communists and nationalists. In 1964, British Somaliland left when it became independent and joined with Italian Samoa, although they still use the shilling to this date. Rhodesia was the first nation to be expelled in 1965. This was because they unilaterally declared their independence American style, although Zimbabwe still use the pound to this day. Burma left in 1966 when they was taken over by a socialist military dictatorship. In 1967, Australia left to the pound being devalued. Australia then pegged itself to the US dollar, and this was the only major economy to ever leave the sterling area. Libya was expelled in 1971 due to instability in the region. It then adopted the dinar as their own currency. The last nation to leave was the Republic of Ireland in 1979. However, at this point, the sterling area had effectively ceased to exist. This is because the sterling area was effectively destroyed when the UK joined the European Economic Community. When it joined, the sterling area fell to the wayside. This ended with a decline of special trade links between the Commonwealth nations and the United Kingdom. It also ended a lot of poor nations' free access into UK markets. Most of the members of the sterling area would then leave the bloc to peg their currencies to the US dollar, and it remains this way to this date. There are 3 or 4 nations that use the pound sterling as of 2021. These are the United Kingdom, the British Indian Ocean Territory, South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands, and the British Arctic Territory, which doesn't really count as a nation, which is why I say 3 or 4. There are 6 nations that use their own version of the pound that is pegged to the pound sterling. These are the Falkland Islands, Gibraltar, Guernsey, the Isle of Man, Jersey, and the St Helena, Ascension and the Tristan Kahuna Islands. And lastly, there are 5 nations that use their own versions of the pound that aren't pegged to the pound sterling. These are Egypt, Lebanon, South Sudan, Syria, and lastly Zimbabwe. In the 1960s, there was a debate about decimalisation. This was because most of the nations around the world had decimalised their currency, but the UK had not. Spoilers, but the UK did end up decimalising. This means that nowadays there's 100 pence in a pound. However, before decimalisation, there was 240 pence in a pound. I'm now going to quickly go over why 240 pence is much better than 100 pence. The most needed number you need to divide your currency by is obviously 2. 100 divided by 2 is obviously 50, and 240 halved is 120. So at this point, decimalisation seems much simpler, doesn't it? However, the second most needed number to divide by is 3. Now if you divide 240 by 3, you get 80. But how do you divide 100 by 3? Well, this is where the problems start with decimalisation. In layman's terms, if you go out for a meal, you can easily split the bill between 2 people. But it's much harder to split a bill between 3 people. This is because 240 is what mathematicians call a highly composite number. This makes 240 so much more adaptable than 100. For example, the derivables of 100 are 1, 2, 4, 5, 10, 20, 25, 50 and 100. These are the only options of coinage under the decimalised system. Don't ask why they chose to do 25 pence coins instead of 20p coins. However, the derivables of 240 are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12, 15, 16, 20, 24, 30, 40, 48, 60, 80, 220 and 240. I think this makes it obvious why 240 is a much better number. I also found a YouTube channel called Lindybeige who explores this subject in higher detail than this, so you may want to watch that video as well. I'll link him in the description below. Britain did decide to go down the decimalisation route as it was considered more important for international trade. As stated before, most of the world had already decimalised, so it was seen as beneficial for Britain to do the same. South Africa had also decimalised, with extremely good results, which spurred the British government on even more. The Irish pound was also decimalised on the 15th of February 1971, the same date as the British pound, as the Republic of Ireland was still part of the sterling area. Decimalisation was really well done, with the public well prepared for the date beforehand. The government printed and delivered a huge booklet campaign across the UK, explaining these new coins. The BBC put their propaganda hats on and went full force with a massive publicity campaign on the run-up. This included a song by Bygraves called Decimalisation, that I'll link in the description. Many TV shorts were also created to run in advert times. The most notable of these was called Granny Gets the Point by ITV. This short encouraged decimalisation and mocked those not wanting it, using a grandson knowing the new system explaining it to his old-fashioned grandmother. Much of this footage was aimed at children as well as adults, with one show using puppets to promote the new system. At first, both old and new systems were displayed on items for sale to help the process along. Old money was accepted, but the store was only allowed to give change in new money, with the old money being returned to be melted down. Decimal Day went really smoothly, with the main criticism being that some outlets used the fog to put prices up. The Royal Mint was moved to Wales for decimalisation, where there was much more space to produce the amount of coins needed. The Royal Mint doesn't only make British coins, it produces coins for over 80 countries across the globe. This is because it's known for its high standards, and I'll be doing a video on the Royal Mint itself in a future video. The Bank of Wales was also founded in 1971. However, it was soon taken over by the Bank of Scotland in 1986. The EU wanted to create a unified currency since the 1960s. They then came up with the Maastricht Treaty, that stated that all EU states would need to adopt a single currency. After tough negotiations with the UK, the Maastricht Treaty stated that by 1999, economic and monetary union would be needed by all EU states except from the UK and Denmark. This opt-out was secured by the then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, who also got many other opt-outs from the UK. However, Margaret Thatcher was no longer the Prime Minister when the Maastricht Treaty came to the UK to be voted on. The new Prime Minister John Major was in support of the Maastricht Treaty. However, 22 rebels led by Margaret Thatcher was against it, along with the Labour opposition. They were still against this treaty as they saw it from the EU turning from a trade bloc and evolving into a federal state. They managed to stop the bill passing twice. However, on the third reading, 5 Labour MPs supported John Major and the bill passed. This then ended up with the creation of a new political party, UKIP, which had the pound as their logo. The euro currency was started in 1999 and started to circulate in 2002. However, due to the UK's opt-out, they didn't need to take it on. This wasn't the case for the Republic of Ireland, who was no longer a part of the UK, so the opt-out didn't apply to them. The Irish pound was then discontinued, making way for the European euro. This led to Ireland losing their historic currency. However, the Bank of Ireland in Northern Ireland is still allowed to mint its own Irish banknotes. Unlike most nations where only one central bank is allowed to produce and issue currency, in the UK there are 8 banks allowed to do this, all overseen by the Bank of England. In England and Wales, there's only one bank allowed to issue currency, that being the Bank of England, with the Royal Mint itself being located in Wales. There are 3 banks with Scotland with this privilege. These are the Bank of Scotland, Clydesdale Bank and the Royal Bank of Scotland. In Northern Ireland there are 4 banks with this privilege. These are the Northern Bank, the First Trust Bank, Ulster Bank and the Bank of Ireland. The notes created in Scotland and Northern Ireland are not legal tender and just there for heritage purposes, although they're still traded as if they were legal, although they can be refused by certain outlets. A new form of currency appeared in 1996, cyber currency. This currency is purely digital and can be traded using the World Wide Web, with its value coming from stocks. This really took off in 2009 with the creation of Bitcoin by the Japanese Satoshi Nakamoto. Many nations across the globe have on and off considered adopting their own digital currency as of 2016, including the UK. In 2017, the United Arab Emirates launched the first state-backed cryptocurrency. This is called Mcash. Venezuela also launched the Petro in 2018. This has seen a few debates in the House of Lords, the House of Commons and within the Bank of England. These debates were not all formal and some just being in casual conversation and references. Some say that we should do away and completely abolish physical money, while others say that we should run a digital currency side by side, while others don't think it's a good idea at all. In 2021, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, announced that a new britcoin may be on the way. Thanks for watching, I hope you learnt something.